Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to be looking at a new to us mold material. Now, I built this janky mold frame out of some steel bar because they don't manufacture anything like this size that I needed, and I really needed to make this quick. So this new material to us is called Econosil, and it comes from Castaldo. It's not a brand new material by any means, but new to us. And this stuff is weird in that it's kind of like a hybrid between RTV silicone and natural rubber. As you can see, it's got like a weird consistency to it. Normally, the natural rubber material is a hard sheet that kind of just sticks to itself, but it's not as putty-like as this stuff. With natural rubbers, you can't really handle them in the same way as this stuff because you can kind of contaminate it with finger oils so that the rubber doesn't stick together and then properly expand and vulcanize. This stuff is different in every way in that you can panhandle it, push it around, just basically play with it and build structures if you want to, and it should be fine. One layer of Econosil is not quite thick enough to meet the ultimate thickness of this mold, which was 3/4 of an inch. So I ended up taking a chunk of it and just kind of smearing it around and building up an extra thick layer. You always want to have just a little bit more material than what you need in the mold so that when the material is in the vulcanizer heating, that the material can then expand, fill all of those details. You get a nice tight mold with no air bubbles or gaps, and ultimately you just get a really nice injection. According to the Castaldo website about this Econosil material, it is durable enough that it can be used to cut incredibly complex aspects of the mold, such as spirals, cores, flaps, and whatever else complex things you can come up with, so that you can ensure that you get a good injection. So I used the recommended vulcanizer settings for this material. I put it in with steel plates at I think it was 320 Fahrenheit, but it has a range between 320 and 350. The recommended vulcanizing time is 15 minutes per 6 millimeters of thickness in the mold. So that would equal out to about 45 minutes. However, I didn't allow my vulcanizer to preheat for very long, up to its full temp, so I ended up putting it in for just an hour. I like to work on a steel tabletop because it pulls a lot of the heat away from the mold. I know it's a little bit tricky to work with while it's hot, but I like to try to get everything out as quickly as possible so that it cools down quicker and I can get to the cutting. So cutting this material is pretty standard. I would say it's definitely on the firm side. It's, I believe, on a shore hardness scale between 65 and 80, which isn't too bad. I am typically using shore hardness of 40 when it comes to my RTV rubbers, so comparatively this is about twice as hard. Now, I actually quite like that, especially for this particular mold, because it's so wide and flat. I'm going to need that rigidity to resist the clamping pressure that I'll need to hold it together properly when I inject the wax. And because it's so wide, I'm probably going to have that wax temp up a little bit higher than I'm comfortable with to make sure that it gets into all those details. So the way I approached cutting this mold is pretty standard. I didn't use any of the tricks like separation cream or powder or anything. I just established a center line and then cut the 4 mold locks in the corner. I like to use the wavy line technique because it basically locks the mold together at every single point. You're not just having those 4 corner mold locks like you would if you used the separation technique. For such a wide design, if you use a flat, the separation method, then you're going to see flashing, or you're likely to see more flashing along that seam. Bearing in mind that this is the first time we've actually used Econosil to make a mold, so excuse me when I make a couple of little errors here and slips. This stuff is a little bit different. I am by no means a master mold maker. I am entirely self-taught, but I feel like I get by well enough using this technique. If I were to make this mold again, which I very well may have to in the future if there's enough demand for it, I would definitely go back and do the separation method, but just in the middle here where I'm having some trouble with the details. I did have some trouble keeping this even across all of them, so some of the little marks or some of these little flowers are going to be a little bit lopsided. However, I think that's just a minor detail, and it's one of those live and learn type deals. If I had one thing that I do not like about this material, it would be the smell. This stuff it's hard to describe to you, viewer, because you've never smelled it, but it's kind of like a burnt rubber, silicone, plastic, terracotta. It's a whole bunch of things all together, and it's very difficult. It's very just gross. It's just a passive radiating stink. But overall, I do enjoy this material. If you're looking for a molding material that's very beginner friendly, I would recommend giving Econosil a try. So that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one.